hopefully he'll be able to join us. So the first order of business is to call the meeting to order. So the normal incantation is to say, pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20B, following the governor's declaration of a state of emergency in the Commonwealth arising from the COVID-19 pandemic, the committee will meet virtually utilizing, the advisory committee will meet virtually utilizing Zoom technology. All votes will be taken by a roll call vote. So just in terms of who's present, I'll call the roll for note-taking purposes. Adam Ammon.
Aye.
Well, here, we're not voting.
Here. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I kid. Gianestino. Well, we see you, so. Yeah, okay. Fran Collins is not here yet. Mike Barclay.
Present.
Patrick Kennedy.
Here.
Mark Maggi.
Present.
Mary McGoldrick.
Present.
Meg Wheeler.
Present.
And Rob Hillman is present, and Chris Senior is with us as well. So all committees in their first meeting of the calendar year are supposed to reorganize. And that means electing a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. So it's, I suppose the process would be to ask for nominations for each, do a vote, and then move forward. So I consulted with Chris about the order in which these things go. And it starts with chair. I wondered aloud if I needed to recuse myself, but he said, nah, it's not a matter of that level of formality. So I see a hand from Mrs. McGoldrick. Yes, Mary.
Yes, I would like to nominate you, Rob Hillman, for chair once again, because there's nothing to preclude that, and you have done an outstanding job.
Well, that's kind of you. Does anyone else have?
I'll second that.
Okay, a second. Any other nominations? Hearing none, I'm not going to do William Sherman. You know, if nominated, I will not run. If elected, I will not serve. I'd be happy to do it. I appreciate the nice words, and I think having a year to get started on this, I think, you know, two things. One is there's some things I'd like to help the committee achieve, and second, the best thing we did last year was put together what I think is a really good committee. So this will be fun. That said, I suppose we should vote. We vote by roll call. I guess there's one candidate to vote for. It's kind of Soviet. But all in favor of electing me chair again. Adam Ammon.
This is when I'll say aye, Adam Ammon.
Outstanding, thank you. Gianestino.
Aye.
Mike Barclay.
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy.
Aye.
Mark Maggi.
Because you got my name right, I'll say aye.
I have it written out in that sort of phonetic spelling. Because
I appreciate your attention to detail.
I try. Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
Meg Wheeler.
Aye.
And just for the record, I'll abstain. The second order of business is the election of a vice chair. I have opinions about this, but I'll see if there are any other. Mr. Kennedy.
Patrick Kennedy nominates Mary McGoldrick because she did a great job filling in for Rob when he wasn't there. And
I'll second that.
she's awesome.
And yes, exactly. I'll second the awesomeness. So we have Mary moved and seconded. Any alternatives? No discussion. I will say it out loud. I called Mary. I said, I'd be happy to be chair again, but if you have the least desire, I'd be happy to hand over the gavel. And she told me to stop talking. So, but was good enough to indicate that she would accept. Will you accept the nomination, Mary?
Yes, I will.
Outstanding. Then we'll move right to a vote. Adam, correct me on the pronunciation of your last
Amen.
name. Amen. Okay. then-
Yeah. And
Um,
I'll vote for Mary. Aye.
excellent. Gina Stino,
Aye.
Mike Barclay,
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy,
Aye.
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Mary,
Abstain?
Meg Wheeler,
Aye.
and Rob Hillman is an enthusiastic aye. So we now have a chair and a vice chair. We need a secretary. Any nominations or self-nominations? Is anyone willing to continue to do it, or would rather, move to a different community in order to avoid the responsibility? What do I hear?
I'm willing to continue doing it, but Adam will have to take over after a year.
That comports with what I understood to be the traditions of this committee. So
I thought it
I'm
was
gonna-
you, Mike, though, right? Didn't Mike join before me?
No, you are our junior member by about 3 weeks. So actually, the official record would be when you went and did this at town hall. So that's
So I'll nominate
determinable.
Mike Barclay for secretary.
Well,
Nope.
I think Patrick.
I'll
is
move
nominated
to another town.
himself. You've already done that dodge, Mike. Listen, I'm gonna. I hear Patrick is being nominated. Do I have a second on Patrick's nomination?
I'll second
Second.
Patrick's nomination.
Okay, is there anyone else who's interested in chucking somebody else under that particular bus? Hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote on Mr. Kennedy. Adam Amen,
Aye.
Gina Stino,
Aye.
Mike Barclay,
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy,
Aye.
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
Meg Wheeler,
Aye.
and Rob Hillman. I am an aye. So we now have full boards. Chris, I think that's what we need to do in connection with reorganization. Did I miss anything?
Nope, I think you got it.
Yeah, good. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a recap of the special town meeting and priorities for the upcoming town meeting. And I think that I just want to explain what I meant by a recap of the special town meeting, and make reference to what one of our other boards did without belaboring it too much. The town was blessed with a series of several really very dull town meetings, ones for which there was a lot of preparation, and things that were on the warrant had been well vetted and were well supported. And the last special town meeting prior to this one, I recall it took longer to get a quorum than it took to vote our way through the warrant, which I remember distinctly because one of my adult sons came all set for his first town meeting when he was home from college, and there was just no there. Over COVID, we had a number of them that were, pared down. The two annual town meetings were pared down and very carefully planned out, and they went very, very smoothly. We were at the most recent special town meeting, and I recall there came a point when I had a conversation with one of you, just a little crosstalk at the table, about not as a body addressing the debate when it began to go sideways on a warrant article that we had approved. And just for those of you who maybe aren't aware, while I think the world of our town moderator, Dan Evans, he has an expressed preference that the boards, selectmen, the select board and us express our views on warrant articles by our votes, and don't necessarily need to prolong town meeting by making presentations. I watched a select board meeting following town meeting where there was a lot of discussion about where there is an article that the various boards who considered it voted in approval of, and things come off the floor at town meeting that I won't engage in characterization of them, but they did. And that the boards were not prepared, none of them, to articulate the reasons that those warrant articles had been approved prior. And Mike and I had a brief back and forth. He asked, why don't we do this? And in fact, we used to, and had sort of moved away from it. I feel strongly after seeing what happened at that meeting that we owe it to the town to be prepared at these meetings with any sort of a warrant article that might be controversial, to have one of our members prepared to speak for the majority of the board that voted in favor, or for that matter, in opposition to any given warrant article, to do our job as an advisory committee. We can't necessarily rely on the proponents to maybe make all the arguments, or perhaps they did make all the arguments and they need to be amplified to some extent. But coming into the next meetings, with your approval, I want to work with Dan on that. If you're interested in some of the other reactions, you can look at the recording of the selectmen's meeting of early December following special town meeting. At about the 2-hour mark, that board takes up this issue, and I'll just leave two thoughts. One of which is, I don't think the answer is to do a lengthy presentation prior to debate. That happened on zoning articles at the second of the outdoor special town meetings. I'm not sure that was as effective as simply being prepared to have someone go up and address issues that maybe are coming off the floor that are not quite consistent with our view as having taken a longer consideration of things. There's some people with particular professional talents on this board who are used to addressing arguments on the fly. One of whom almost addressed our town moderator as Your Honor, which I thought was a nice moment. But the other thing I wanted to point out was that, I realize what I'm beginning to sound like, but this is, I think, my 30th year of attending town meeting very regularly. I've probably attended all but a handful. And I am always disappointed when an article comes up which has been vetted at length and in depth by several boards, including ours, but also the boards from which they originate. And points are made in opposition that were not raised during the vetting process, and by people who didn't bother to attend the meetings and to articulate those positions before so they could be considered and wrapped into the decision. Heck, it's perfectly possible somebody could have come in front of our board and convinced us to take a different position had they wanted to bother. But that's not what happens, and I think it subverts the decision-making process, and I know that other people have said so. So I've now had my rant, and I appreciate, now that you've granted me another year of vast imperial power, I'm going to abuse it right out of the blocks. But I'd like just a brief discussion if any of you, have a different idea, agree, disagree. But my plan would be that to be prepared to respond and participate substantively in meetings to advocate for the positions that we've taken. Anybody? Oh, Mike, your hand is up.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you, Rob. I think what's really important is, we represent the town as a whole. And so any issue that comes before us, if we vote, unanimously, certainly, but even in an overwhelming fashion in favor of it, I think it's important to articulate why we approve, agree with something for the good of the town. We know that on the floor of town meeting, people have, specific interests can get up and mount an effort to go against an article, but I think we owe it to the rest of the people who might not be as informed about the subject matter to articulate why we agreed to vote for it. So that's just, I agree 100% with you, Rob. The other question I have, and I know I'm new, this meeting happens every December, right?
Yes.
So it's not special. I was
Yes,
was-
it
I was-
occurs at predictable intervals. You're absolutely correct.
I was struck by one of the arguments for voting down the zoning articles was because this was a special town meeting. And in my opinion, if you have a committee who's done a lot of good work and is ahead of schedule on vetting an issue, why wait until the regular town meeting when we have a regular December town meeting? So I was just struck by people, saying that this is a special town meeting, and because of that, these articles should not be considered, which at least one or two people, I think, said, during the discussion. So for what that's worth, maybe we should rename it something besides the special town meeting, because it does happen every year and it's not special. So anyway.
I agree. I thought that argument had no merit and was surprised. Well, it became, never mind, I'm not going to editorialize. Anyone
I
else?
think the reason that it's called that is because the bylaws require an annual town meeting. And so the spring is always called the annual town meeting, and any other town meeting, I believe, is just a special. But you're right that it's pretty regular in the late fall, although we did not have one in fall, December of 2020.
That's correct. I recall when there was a decision at sort of town government level generally to break the process into two parts, and to create a non-special special town meeting, a non-emergency special town meeting, or a regularly held fall or winter town meeting. And that was to keep the spring town meeting agenda a little bit more, a little lighter, and a little able to focus on the big picture being the budget. But I agree with your characterization of all the other considerations, and we should stress that. Anyone else? Mary?
Yeah, I would just concur. I think if nothing else, having been involved in the committee that was called by the selectmen and things get a little off the rails here and there, it's important for us and as an advisory committee to pull the focus back to the fact that these folks have done 1 to 2+ years work on the subject that they're presenting. They didn't just get together in somebody's basement for a few weeks and come up with an idea. And I think even if we have a dissenting vote, it's important to give both sides of the coin and if nothing else, just acknowledge the amount of work that's been done.
Yeah, there's a tension between trying to recruit talented volunteers to do things and then discarding their work is it's not a good recruiting tool, at least from my perspective. Anyone else?
Can I ask, is there precedent for letting non-residents speak at these things?
I don't recall it happening often. I have a distant memory of it happening maybe in a very special circumstance. I don't want to criticize the town moderator, but I think
No, nor do I. I'm just wondering
Yeah.
if we should decide whether or not that's going to be allowed to happen. On the floor of the event, it's tough to say no, but if we decide
I
whether or
think-
not it's going to happen beforehand, that makes the decision slightly easier.
perhaps we can have a conversation prior to this meeting about maybe making a recommendation to the town moderator. But maybe there are facts or precedent that I'm not aware of.
I mean, I know in other towns, they let them come into the meeting and then there has to be a vote to allow them to speak. They don't automatically get to speak.
That
That's just, other towns. I'm not sure that's
Sure.
a rule.
Chris?
Not to way too deep on this, but as I understand the powers of the moderator has the right to give access to the right to speak to non-voters. The town meeting itself may actually, I think, also have that authority, but the moderator as the chair of the meeting has that authority. It has happened a couple times in the last 8 years. It's not very often. Dan is pretty strict. And I believe the only reason, at least the reason he stated, was that this was a property owner in town who was potentially affected by the ordinance. So I think it was his, and he had been approached in advance. That said, the same conversations you're having tonight has already been had by the select board and the planning board and other boards about prepping and being more vocal during a town meeting when there's something that clearly has some potential to go sideways if people aren't hearing the straight story.
Yeah, so, Adam,
And some of the feedback that we heard at the special town meeting was the fact that a lot of people were surprised about when they received the warrant itself, what some of the changes that were being made. And so what that kind of brings me back to is that there's good communication when it comes to the special town meetings and the annual town meeting, but I don't think a lot of people know what's going on in the individual committees, and especially when it impacts zoning, which apparently, and I don't know if that's, you're mentioning about the 2-hour mark in the meeting that happened at the end of December, like whether or not the zoning topic was the controversial item, but ultimately that's why there was so many passionate people, because a lot of people felt like they were impacted by a decision that kind of caught them off guard. And so as a committee, I think the planning board could have done a better job communicating some of their meetings that they were having leading up to the special meeting and some of the changes that they were going to be considering. And I didn't personally see any of that communication. And I'm pretty in tune with some of the meetings that are happening, but so that's just some of the feedback that I would give.
I recall that there was some discussion of that among the selectmen, among the select board when they met. And, I was speaking with somebody about, some of these boards, including ours, when, we duly post, we say what we're going to talk about. It's utterly predictable that the advisory committee will be conducting public meetings to address, these sorts of changes. And I think for illustrative purposes only, example is that we could put on our agenda that we were going to have a human sacrifice at the 1 hour mark, and then we could do so, and we still wouldn't get any ayes. Your point is exactly right, and it was brought up several times. But how you make people pay attention is hard. I mean, I think compliance in this town with the open meeting law is exceptionally good. But the open meeting law doesn't really require much more than 48 hours of posting. It would help, frankly, if we had a more robust local paper that everybody read. The Mariner
honestly,
of 10 years ago was a better, I can say this out loud, I hope, was a better paper. They would report on upcoming topics and what the scoundrels on this board or that board were up to. And, it's now an under-resourced paper, and some of these online Facebooky outlets really aren't, they're not professional journalists, and they're not driving the dry stuff. But if you had a reporter who was reporting, hey, the planning board is planning to come up with, 10-acre minimum lot size zoning. Well, by golly, somebody might show up for that meeting. So I don't know what the solution to the problem is, but I agree that you've identified the problem. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the best communication that we receive is, and it's unfortunate because of the platform that it's on, but it's what Chris posts every month about some of the happenings around Cohasset, where he posts on Facebook 143, like these are the things that are happening, and he typically posts 4 or 5 items and then provides some information or attachments to those items. And I think if the planning board and some of the other committees were to do something similar to that, especially like you saw the communication with the town hall, people are pretty active online. And I think that's probably the best location, unfortunately, for us to be posting some of that information.
You may be right. Meg, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, I would just to add to that, I think we just have to remember that these meetings are not always accessible to everyone. I know there are meetings I wanted to go to that are scheduled during the workday, and that's not an option. And I can only speak for busy parents. I know everyone here probably has their own obligations, but certainly a 2 or 3 hour meeting, on a weeknight isn't always a possibility. So I encourage us and challenge us as an advisory committee and as a town to continue to think about how we can engage more people through different methods. And finding ways to synchronize that information so that it's much more easily digestible would be really, I think, well received.
Jean?
At the beginning of each year, the school committee posts every meeting throughout the year and puts it on their website. Our meetings are not as rigidly scheduled as theirs are, but maybe there's a way to do something similar to that so that we pick a day of the month and potentially expect that we're going to have a meeting that night. And then we could put it somewhere on the town website so that if people have interest in advisory committee business, they can just check the agenda center.
Well, after we set up our calendar, maybe we'll take some steps to, I don't know, maybe a group TikTok video with the dates.
Do we have to dance?
If I could just give
Not
you a little
right
quick
world.
codas, Rob,
Yeah,
I
go
can't,
ahead, Chris.
I can't put my hand up because I'm hosting the meeting here. So my virtual hand. So there were 2 big planning board hearings that were pretty well attended, actually, on these topics, and many of the folks who came to oppose came to town meeting too. So that clearly carried through. That said, I think Anna's point and Jean's points are well taken. The select board has made communications a big goal, and they've authorized me to hire someone to live communications as kind of a communication specialist and really a content manager to make sure that we're getting information out to people. It's in an understandable form. We're reaching people where they are. And by the way, Adam, I post that every week, that 5 things. And it's on, so again, but everyone's not going to see it, right? It goes on the town's Facebook page. And we push out to a lot of committee members. I'm not sure if you're all getting it in your inbox, but I do a once a week update. And it's not, it's just a summary of, it's like, here are some important things you should probably know what's going on. And it can't be, I can't do everything in there, but no, it's a mixture of like, for example, next week, Saturday, or this Saturday is a vaccine clinic for kids 5 to 11 at the Deer Hill School. If anyone has a kid in that age range that hasn't gotten their first or second shots, that's going to be open. We put that out there. We put it on the town's Facebook page and on the town's website, and we push it out by email. That said, it's only a small part of what I do. I mean, I communicate all the time, just like I'm doing here. That said, there's so many other things that all of us are doing. Having one person whose job it is to make sure things are getting out to the residents in a variety of formats is a big step forward. So you'll be hearing more about that as we actually, and again, if anyone has any thoughts about someone who might be interested in that job as it's more formally posted this week, I'm all ears. So that said, Don is in the audience, so we're ready to go whenever you are for budget conversations.
Good, okay. Let's move on in the agenda then. We had scheduled, of course, the agenda on my screen. No, it is not. We had scheduled an update on budget, and then sort of a parallel agenda item was there was a budget presentation for the select board yesterday, and I was promised that we would get a view of that as well. If that's still the plan, Don, let us know. But why don't you come on and kind of let us know where we are and where we're going.
Good evening. I apologize. I got to go through my phone. My work laptop died on me last night, and my backup laptop would not let me get on Zoom. So, number one, I just saw the agenda today. I knew we were doing the budget presentation. I've not prepared December's financials for you folks. So I plan on having those updated in the next week or so. And so one of the next meetings, we can do a year-to-date update. Tonight, I was just going to focus on the forecast and the budget presentation that we made to the select board last night, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. Thanks.
So we had,
and I think I'll say one more thing and I'll stop talking. I believe that the office circulated a couple of documents, 5-year projection and and the other one, the spreadsheet. So we have those individually. If you're going to use them, it's probably still good idea to put them on the screen if Chris can.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have Chris kind
Oh,
of.
yeah, you can,
describe the
not on a phone.
forecast,
Yeah, quite right. So go ahead.
Unfortunately, but.
So again, so
Chris-
now we're going to focus on the operating budget. So I'm going to put the 5-year up, and Don's going to walk through it. Please ask any questions. What you'll do tonight is schedule departmental. We're not giving you the deep dive in every line item. That's coming next. So you'll be getting all of that material as we head into the individual departmental discussions. And then the capital is there for just for information purposes at this point. Capital budget starts. I want to say start Monday to deep dive into some of these. They've already actually gotten a lot of these. Got all the materials on the projects. And the goal now is to kind of whittle them down to see what we can actually make, what really has to get done this year and how we fund it. So you're going to be talking a lot more about those in coming weeks. So we're going to mostly focus on the operating budget tonight. So I will post that up, Don, and you can direct me how you want me to move it around.
Yeah, so for the new members, I'll just give you a quick overview of what this 5-year forecast is. Town Manager Act requires that the town manager present a 5-year forecast annually. And included in this forecast are a summary of our revenue sources, shared expenditures, and when I say shared expenditures, things that benefit both school department and other town departments. And then the forecast is used to determine what the net new revenue is for the year. And then we end up splitting that new revenue and sharing that between the school and the town, 61% and 39% respectively. And for some background, this is not a written, documented breakdown between the school and the town. It's been something we've been doing for a number of years. And when I first got the question how we determine that percentage split, I wasn't sure. So I went back and I started looking at all the different budgets, personnel, expenditures, operating expenses. And when I compared the school and town payroll for 5 years in a row, the split is almost 61-39. So I'm assuming at one point in time, it was determined that based on payroll is how we would split the new revenue sources. So that's just a quick overview on really what the forecast is. And now I'll just get into each section here. So the first part, we look at revenues, about $53 million in total. The largest portion of our revenue source is a tax levy. There's about 83% of our total revenues is a tax levy. And of the levy, 93% is residential tax base. So huge portion of our burden is on the residents. And for this year in 23, you see the calculation there. We increased 2.5% with an estimate of new growth. Historically, we budget somewhere around 450 for a good conservative number. Based on some of the projects we're seeing that are ongoing right now and some that are coming in the near future, we bumped that estimate up to about 500,000 for fiscal 23, which we still consider a reasonable and conservative estimate, bringing our total number to about 44.2 million for the tax levy. The next two sources are number 2 and 3 on the impact of the revenues. State aid, about 3.5 million. We kept that flat from last year. Just not knowing where the state is going to come in on our state aid. We just wanted to be conservative at the first cut of the forecast. So we're continuing with about 3.5 million. And again, the reason we don't really want to estimate a change here is things just can change from the governor's budget to when the final state house budget. And last year it was small, but we saw a net decrease from the governor's to the final of about 4,000. So we think it's a conservative approach of just being flat for planning purposes. We should get the numbers, at least from the governor. I think January 26th is the date. The next line item is local receipts, which within local receipts, the majority of that section is motor vehicle excise taxes, license and permits, fees, And we've brought this revenue source back to pre-pandemic levels, back to levels from FY20, and then made some adjustments up for motor vehicle excise and license and permits. Just from, again, the building that we're seeing and the permit fees that are coming in, we felt that we could increase some of those estimates a bit for FY23. And so we're still a lag. So when I say we brought them back from FY20, we didn't factor in any potential increase year over year. We just looked at where we were with our actuals and felt comfortable that bringing them back from FY20 and with some minor adjustments was reasonable. And when the pandemic first hit our FY21 budget, we had cut our local receipts and state aid 10% and 5% respectively. And so now that we're doing better than anticipated and a bit of a rebound, bringing them back to pre-pandemic levels is where we're at today. The next section of other financing sources, and these are mostly transfers from Capital Stabilization Fund, Community Preservation, Title V, to offset debt service costs. So for instance, Capital Stabilization, when capital budget approves anything for borrowing, the Capital Stabilization Fund will transfer in the annual debt service to cover that payment. Same thing with CPC and Title V Betterment Program. The money that goes into Title V is in a separate fund, and we transfer in money to pay that specific debt annually. And then just above that, you'll see free cash for OPEB, pension, and a transfer from pension stabilization. When we cut our revenues 10 and 5% back in FY21, to keep services level, to continue fully budgeting the school department and all our town department without making cuts, we did utilize free cash to essentially balance the budget. And as you can see, we've decreased a little less than 200,000 from FY22 to 23. And I'm hoping that next year we get into a cycle of not having to utilize this, where our full budget is again back within the tax levy and the other revenue sources. So in total, that's the breakdown of almost 53 million. And I'd be happy to stop here and answer any questions that you might have.
Sorry, hands, anyone? Patrick?
Don, I just want to make sure I understand the transfer or one-time receipts for free cash, OPEB, and pension. Do those numbers mean that we actually took money out of the OPEB fund in order to apply it to the regular budget items?
No. So which I'll get to in a minute is in our annual town meeting in the annual operating budget, we fund a transfer to OPEB. And so the revenue source would normally be built into the tax levy. So it'd be covered under the tax levy. We ended up pulling and utilizing free cash to essentially fund OPEB for the last couple of years. Again, just to make the budget balance. OPEB, although we do have a financing schedule and a policy that's approved by the select board, that is one that's reasonable. It's a one-time cost. Essentially, we're putting money into stabilization. So free cash was reasonable. I surely don't want to use free cash every year. We were in a pandemic, again, trying to make sure that we were providing the residents of Cohasset with services that they expect and want to see within, again, school departments, our police and DPW. So those are funding sources. We made the contributions that we needed to the OPEB trust. And the pension side, we ended up getting hit with almost a 22% increase in our pension assessment for fiscal 22. So to try to offset that impact is, again, why we utilize the pension stabilization fund and free cash, so that we can kind of build that increase into the budget over a couple of years, again, not affecting primary services of the town.
So the short answer is we took it out of the rainy day fund because of the COVID impacts and the budget impacts in the short run because of COVID and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. Yeah.
Thanks.
Mike, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Don, just a quick question on the pension, I guess, assumptions that drive the funding of it. How is that set in terms of, dusting off my pension accounting here, but typically you gotta have an assumed rate of return on the assets at a discount rate, from the terminal value. And I guess I'm asking because rates have gone up, and if they go up and stay up, does that change kind of the economics or the annual, amount that has to be contributed to meet the obligation?
So the pension system, we're Norfolk County pension system. They are required by state law to be funded by 2040. I believe they're scheduled to be fully funded even before that. But so what happens is they do a full actuarial evaluation every 2 years to determine the next 2 years of payments. And so what they do is they take a look at what their assumptions are. They take a look at what your actual returns were, actual assumptions. They may make some changes in mortality tables that could affect that. And then because we're in a county system where like Hingham has their just one system, and it's just Hingham retirees and resident or employees that are paying in, there's a big calculation done of the liability, and then it's allocated based on essentially your covered payroll by town. So then again, it's done every 2 years. So you could have a year where maybe you didn't fill a couple positions. So they're not seeing that payroll data. And then, we got some grants through the school. We had some other people that were on our rolls. So our numbers were definitely increased a bit. And so we got hit with a big percentage. But again, that is done every 2 years of evaluation. So I'm hoping that when the next valuation, so our FY23 pension assessment that I'll cover in a minute is what it is. That was based on 2 years ago valuation. As of June of 2021, they had a 30% investment income. I mean, they did great. I'm hoping that will trickle down into their next 2 years of assessments to communities. But we're kind of stuck in a position where it's based on their calculations and assumptions. What we will be doing is getting the data ahead of time from them before they do their calculations, just to ensure that who they have on the rolls is accurate. Because we found a couple little errors that they had. One they gave us credit for, another one they just said it kind of comes out in the wash, which I didn't love that answer. But after about 10 or 15 calls back and forth, they kind of just told me to beat it. So unfortunately, one tough thing about being in a county system like that is
okay, that's helpful. I didn't realize it was a county system, so it's sort of we really have no jurisdiction over the assumptions and whether or not they're reasonable or not. So
right, it's covered by their pension board. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Which means Norfolk County still exists, which most counties don't anymore. So,
yeah,
better or worse. Anyone else? Okay.
Actually, one more question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
There's a couple items that fall off in fiscal 25 and 26. So debt exclusion under the levy revenue it falls off significantly to zero after 24. And then also the transfer from capital stabilization debt service falls off significantly after 25. Does that mean we have a lot of borrowing debt that's going to term out within the next 3 to 4 years?
Yes. So debt exclusion, the numbers you see in there in the tax levy, those were projects voted 20, 30 years ago that were funded in addition to the 2.5% increase. So yeah, we have a couple pieces of debt out there from school projects that are falling off, and you'll see the corresponding decrease in debt service down below. Talking with Chris earlier, I did notice a small error in my transfer capital stabilization. FY '26 is understated, I think, by about 300,000. I think I just missed that year's debt service, so I'll have to update that for everybody. But there is a true decrease in FY '27 out of there because the projects funded through capital stabilization are rolling off. The reason why capital stabilization increased from 205 up to 640, and it's kind of consistent in the $500,000, because we just borrowed a couple $1 million back in June that was funded over just a 5-year period. So you'll see some corresponding decreases when I get down and start showing you our shared expenses. Our excluded debt falls off in 26, like I just mentioned, and then the other debt will fall off significantly more closer to FY '27 as well.
And then where is the revenue from the capital adjustment that we incur on our water bills? Is that something specific to the water department, or should that be in the revenues as well? Because obviously that's a debt that we're paying down.
Could you, so that is water specific, but
Okay.
if you could repeat the question, I could answer it a little bit better for you.
Yeah, so on our water bills, and I don't know if it's different depending if you're on sewer or on septic, but everybody incurs a capital adjustment, and I forget what the line item exactly called, that is
Recovery
charged
charge.
quarterly. And there's obviously revenue that's received from that, but it's paying down some debt for the improvements to the pipes in the water system. So I was just wondering whether or not that is specific to the water department, or if that should be a line item within the revenues.
That is specific to the water department, as they're operated as an enterprise fund. So we'll come back to you folks probably, I would say early to mid-February with water and sewer respectively, and going over their budgets. But just quickly on that item, the capital recovery charge is a weird term. I wish I was around when that term was determined, because I would not have called it that. I think there were assumptions made years ago that, once some debt was paid off, that we would no longer need to cover other expenses. But it doesn't work. I mean, you continue to do projects, you continue to borrow funds, and you have to pay those back. It's a little misleading, but basically that charge will go on and continue as we continue to do large scale projects into the future.
In fact, that title's been changed. I don't know that it's been caught up on the bill. I think it's called the base rate now or something like that, or the base rate.
I think you're right, Chris.
Yeah, so as Don's pointed out, this predates both of us, but there was a significant debt issue. If you want to sit down with Steve Gomer or somebody from that era, he can probably bend your ear for hours about what happened, or any of the folks in town who were here. That said, the Enterprise or Gene or anyone who's been here for probably more than 15, I guess about 15 years ago, this all kind of hit ahead, I think. So that all said, the department over the last 5, 6, 7 years has done a much better job of long-term planning, which is good. And they've been very aggressive at getting state funding, and they're just completed, I think, another round, a big study. And they're also actually selling water. So we actually sell water to Hingham, which effectively covers the need of the Linden Ponds community. So they've been good about that. And they've been very stable. I think it's fair to say, Don, the last 3 or 4 years.
Absolutely.
Hopefully it'll stay that way. But it is a big number.
Yeah, because last year we at the town meeting accepted a rate increase for the water department. And I think there's always this, I guess, lack of understanding about when that capital recovery charge or that base rate is going to be exhausted and when we're going to be done paying it back. I think understanding that obviously would be important for the town.
Yeah, so that turned into, like Chris mentioned, the base rate. That will continue until the foreseeable future. Again, that's part of the overall structure of the water department budget now. So that won't go away.
Yeah, the term you're looking for, Don, is the end of times.
Yeah.
The end
I
of
know, I was
days.
trying
I'm
not to
sorry.
be so dramatic, but
There is a substantial amount of debt, and water debt tends to run longer because it's usually capital assets that are very long term. So a lot of the debt that was incurred is going to still be there for another decade or 10 to 20 years. That said, there was a number of presentations done, and we can see we can dig them out and share them with you, Adam. In fact, you're new to the board, so I'll take this opportunity to invite you to come and talk to Don and I about anything. We go with the budget book. We'll do, just onboard you about, some historical stuff, how we do operations and all of that, and get you to tour any facilities you haven't seen. We just had Mike do that a couple months ago, and hopefully the pandemic will have eased it again. So I won't have missing shifts for fire and police and public works. We can put you in a truck with somebody safely. But if you want to get a tour, we're happy to get you out there.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And Mark too. I don't know if you're the if there's any facilities that you want to see, Mark. I know you've been deeply involved in the OPEB stuff, so I think you have a pretty good handle on our finances. That said, Don and I are open at any kind of time that any of you need.
In our next agenda item, one of the things I want to go over is our various liaison assignments. And I noticed that Adam has none, being the new guy. And there's an opening on the water and sewer liaison. So it's may be a good opportunity, but we only do these things by agreement, not by assignment. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Further questions for Don, or Don, do you have things further for us?
yeah, I mean, I was just going to touch on
Yeah,
the expenditure side real quick and just give some highlights of
good.
the shared expenses. So I'll skip down to the transfer to other funds. The second category there, we've been committing about $2 million to the capital stabilization fund, which essentially is the budget and funds that capital budget committee oversees. So when the capital requests go to them, they're working within this $2 million plus or minus what is left over in the stabilization fund from the prior year. So right now we have that committed about $2 million. At one point, we'd love to start putting an escalation on that to continue to increase that. But for now, we're continuing at just about 2 million. Transfer to OPEB, I briefly talked about that 2 or 3 years ago now. The years have just been flying by. Select board accepted a policy or approved a policy to fund the OPEB liability, and starting at $500,000 annually, increasing 3% per year. So what we were doing historically was somewhere around 150,000 in the annual operating budget, and then funding another 350,000 out of free cash at the special. And so what you see here is an escalation of that 3% difference annually. I've been trying to build that within the budget here. So that's, if you want to call it a down payment to the first half of our funding plan, that's what that is. And then just some highlights of the big drivers of shared expenses. Two of the big guys are health insurance, which you can see we have a $5.8 million number here. We've really lucked out in the last few years of seeing a couple of years of zero. And because of the pandemic and people not being able to go to the doctors and certain things not being allowed to be scheduled through the medical facilities, we actually received a withholding or an employee holiday for the rates of last year. Fiscal 22 was a full month. So we had 1 month that we didn't have to pay premiums on. The year before was about one half of a month. And so we were in really good shape, but people are going back to the doctors. We're seeing the utilization increase across the board, and we're in the Maya pool. So it's a pool of a number of communities within the state. And right now we're estimating increases of about 7% based on the information that the Maya board and our reps have explained to us. So we're sitting on a 7% estimate there. Another big is property casualty insurance, which is in the risk management line. Again, our reps are having us estimate about 7.5%. These are preliminary numbers, but until we get actual, we kind of have to go with the conservative approach and on what they're guiding us on. And I already touched on Norfolk County, but the 3.4 million, that's not an estimate. That's the actual appropriation that we'll be paying come July 1st. And that came in at 7.3%. So those are three big drivers of the shared budgets. And then when you follow down, Chris, we just scroll down a little bit more. We go from our revenues, our total expenditures to an available revenue number of 35.2 million. So what we do is we calculate the change of that available revenue compared to FY22, which is just under 1.1 or 3.02%. And that is shared between the school and the town, 6139. So you'll see the school budget is getting an increase of about 650,000 and the town budget's about 415. And then you see that the school and town totals below at 21.7 and 13.5. And that's essentially what the forecast is one, a requirement of the town meeting or town manager act, and then our tool for allocating our resources annually.
Mary,
Happy to take any other questions.
Mary?
Yeah, just a couple questions, Don. Under facilities, the custodian staff includes the school custodians, is that correct?
Yeah, so actually, if you look at, it's that school number of 21.7 plus the custodian. So the fiscal 23 is closer to $22.3 million. And then the facilities
Okay,
is really, again, that was something that we tried to break out and have more of a focus on over a few years ago when we had a building. I forget what the study was about the upkeep of the school buildings. And we wanted to keep that above the line to be able to, both for custodians and facilities, fund that first before we get into the splits between town and school. And that's why that still is broken out up there. But that portion of custodians, that does live within the school budget.
okay, so it does live within, okay, now I'm confused. I understood, now I don't.
Yep, so at the bottom, 21.74, right? Plus
Right,
the 6 is 22,345,000. That's really the total school budget where they have the autonomy
Gotcha.
between line items and what they do with the funding once it's approved.
okay, thank you. And then under shared budget details, the CIO line item 155, because that bumps up almost $100,000. Is that encompass the new person that the school's hired, or is that independent of that?
So that is independent. So in there right now, part of this kind of depends on capital. So there are some requests into capital to replace some of our systems and to upgrade them.
Yeah,
We're doing
yeah, I saw
so.
that I would find in the capital budget. Okay,
But so if they fund these,
I'm sorry.
the
go on.
operating cost of maintaining them decreases. So there's a bit of an increase there, but we're also looking to basically move the systems administrator into the central budget for the CIO, because that person is key for all systems in the town, all town departments and school departments as well.
Okay,
It's not a new position. It's kind of been living on the school side, but it's really become a town-wide position, so it's more appropriate to have it living there. So effectively, it'll be a benefit to the schools because that position will just be vacant, and it might help to cover this.
Gotcha.
So that hasn't shown that's not showing in anything yet. That's in terms of the school side of the budget. We're still working with them on that. I don't know quite where they are. So.
okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Any
We're
further
still,
questions?
as John stated,
I'm sorry.
finished
Oh,
budget
Chris.
on January 26th. So we're watching that. And then the Maya insurance numbers should be coming out this weekend. Actually, at least the big broad ranges, which have been kind of telegraphed. We'll be getting our specific rates over the next few weeks. My fingers are crossed. I've been given a tiny little ray of hope that there might be some little bit of better numbers coming out of Maya, but I don't have anything concrete yet. If there are, that's great. We most certainly have needs that we're going to talk about in more depth with public safety. Police reform has really caused some challenges with our ability staff up with part-timers. We have an unsettled fire contract, which unfortunately looks like it's going to go unsettled for some time. So we're going to have some things that we're going to have to tackle, some short term and some a little longer term, depending on how things shake out on the public safety side. So it's a tighter year than well, I should say last couple of years have been kind of tight anyway. But we're not seeing local governments tend to lag. And since we're primarily a property tax driven place, we don't have a lot of fluctuation. We can't really drive motor vehicle tax. And on top of things, it's been hard to buy cars. So this is a town where people replace cars a little more frequently than maybe on average, but I don't think it's been as easy to do. I see Teslas though. Those are great. People can go out and buy those Teslas. They're great for the motor vehicle excise tax. And on the billing side, which Don hinted at, our new building commissioner has been very aggressive in capturing actual fees and requiring an affidavit at the end of a project declaring the actual expense of a project. And he's been picking up $50,000 to $100,000 extra over this last year. And we think he's going to continue to do that because costs have gone up and the fees are tied to that cost. And it's been, and people are pulling permits. A lot of it's not going to turn into new growth. If people are replacing their kitchens, that's awesome. It may change their valuation, but it doesn't change the new growth picture. That said, there's been a pretty strong uptick in permits. People are doing work to their homes. And there are, as Don pointed out, several major projects that have been approved or are pending approval. There's the 390 CJC project, which you can see is nearing is completion. The planning board finally gave its final updates. There's the Carson Harbor Inn project. If anyone's been by there, the hotel is coming down, and there will be a new structures starting. And then there's a 19-unit mini industrial park. If anyone's been out to, is it 175? In Hingham, that little corner in Hingham, Derby Street, 175 Derby. There's like these little offices. There's like small suites. They're like little buildings. If anyone's been over there, it would look kind of like that. There's 19 small office suites, buildings with like 2 to 3 suites in them that are going to go up on the hill behind the medical building and by the insurance, the self-storage facility. And that's going to be pretty substantial growth on the commercial side, which is nice. The planning board's given approval, I think either given approval or about to give approval to those. So we expect to see those get built over the next few years. So there are several big, and there's also one Pleasant, the building right across the train tracks where Fire and Stone, that restaurant is. They've won approval to tear down and rebuild that building, adding residential units to the top, which will be affordable, by the way, rental. They will all be rentals and they'll be dedicated affordable units in that. And when that happens, there'll be an uptick in both the commercial and the residential base value in the town. But outside of those, while there's talk about some other projects, there's nothing that's right there. So there's not a lot of places in Cohasset to build, and nor do people really want to build anything substantial. Though there are still tear down rebuilds. I think we can see those where you drive around, people are buying property, tearing down the homes and putting up new ones. Probably 10 to 15 of those a year. You still see those, and they're probably going to still be that way for a little while. But the big units, there's really not any big pieces of land anywhere that are easily buildable. So the projects that we just mentioned are likely to come through, and they'll also generate building fees. There have to be electrical inspections and plumbing inspections and roofing inspections and you name it. So John and his team will be very busy the next year or two. And we'll have to see how that tracks revenue-wise.
Okay. Anything else, or shall we move on? So the next item on the agenda really is annual town meeting calendar preparation, which is a sufficiently elastic description of what we're going to talk about to both comply with the open meeting law and give us some scope to talk about process. There was a document that I had received that I circulated to you, the members of the committee, which is a FY23 budget and town meeting planning calendar that was adopted by our friends on the select board. It's certainly reasonable in terms of its schedule and how we're constrained between things getting into the process versus the need to get the warrant to the printer. I would say had I been asked by the select board for some input into this, I would ask that the school budget be provided earlier in the process. It's the biggest chunk of the budget, and we're not scheduled to see it until 8-9 days before the final recommendations, which is really not in as much time as I think I might want. That doesn't stop us or really inhibit us from keeping abreast of that process as well and staying on top of it. But that's one of those process points that I think going forward, we ought to look at scheduling. I know in other towns with which I work, their FinComs are a little bit more involved a little bit earlier, but we'll work it out. So I don't know whether you've seen the schedule or had a chance to look at it, but it has the month of February set aside with advisory committee reviews, budgets, and warrant articles, and the month of March really dedicated to reviewing warrant articles. So we should think about a schedule of meetings. I think it'd be worth pulling out calendars and maybe talking our way right across those 2 months to lock them in, or at least get them on paper. We can always move some things around. Does that work for everybody? Do you want to talk about calendars for a few minutes? And then we can move up the hierarchy of needs from that. The Wednesday nights continued. Mary.
Just a quick comment, especially once we get into March, where our presence is expected on the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, the 29th, and April 5th, which are all Tuesdays, I would guess. Last year, we were able to adjourn the joint meetings and then go into our own session after that and talk about anything. I would just put that out there for us to think about as we're picking our dates, especially in the month of March, because I think it gets sometimes it's just a little too cumbersome to be looking at 2 meetings a week for a month.
I think you're right, and I think we probably can. We've done that successfully in the past, is use one night, 2 meetings, particularly if they're virtual. And I know some committees are moving live. I frankly think this is more efficient, particularly if you're trying to separate from one meeting to another meeting. But we'll work that out as we go forward. Chris?
If I could just add too, so the theory with the joint meetings was if it's in person, it's easier to pull everybody together at once and do that, right? When you're virtual, it is easier to flip from one another, but if you have to come a couple nights, like Don and I we've done this budget thing twice, it's okay. I'm actually at my kitchen table tonight. I mean, and he's at home himself. So, and everyone else is at home tonight, looks like. So if you decided that it would be easier to have a separate presentation for your committees on another night, that's okay. This does make it a little easier on people, particularly if they're coming from any distance. And some of our staff, is not right in the immediate area. So we could, there
I
are.
take your point. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me make sure we'll be as flexible as you need us to be.
Okay. So the purpose of these joint meetings isn't so much to have, interaction time with the select board as it is to get to be present for the same presentation that they're getting. That makes sense. We can work around those. I note that we still have Meg, so I want to try and get through this while we while we can. So I want to.
I passed off my duties, so you've got me for a little bit longer.
Thank the recipient of those duties for us, and we'll try and be brief. Do Wednesday nights continue to be? I mean, we're all here minus Fran. Do Wednesday nights for our meetings continue to be convenient? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm-
Wednesday,
Sounds-
Wednesday.
I have
Good.
paddle tennis on Wednesdays, but I can make it work.
We appreciate that. So I was going to suggest that we jump, we'll schedule our next meeting 2 weeks, February 2nd. And that puts us at sort of the front end of these budget review and warrant articles discussions. And we'll talk about liaisons and who we can get in to make these meetings productive once we get a few on the books. Does the second, February 2nd, for February 2nd, Wednesday, February 2nd, is that a good meeting date? When is, and who is affected by the school vacation week?
I am. I'll be away.
I will be.
Yeah, I assume that's usually,
Although
what
it's-
week is that? That's the week of
It's late this year. It's the week of the 21st.
21st, I see. So why don't we pack a couple of meetings into the beginning of the month and then skip that week? So if we want to do,
The 2nd and the 16th, or
well, February, it would be, yeah, the 2nd and the 16th, I think makes sense. And then the 23rd probably does not. But that puts us on the 2nd of March, so. Which. evidently Ash Wednesday. And then, I mean, we're lucky, if lucky is the right word, that March has 5 Wednesdays in it.
Yippee.
Yippee, I know. I mean, the good news is it gives us some scope to get the job, done, and we have been known to be so efficient as to throw some dates back. So I don't think we need to meet 5 weeks in a row by any means. Do we want to maybe meet the 9th, skip the 16th and go to the 23rd? How does that work with our friends on? That seems to be consistent with some of these, when these budgets are going to be coming. So if you look at the planning calendar document, it would make sense to meet on the 9th, because on the 8th, we would have been have the water and sewer budgets out. And then the 16th makes a certain amount of, we could put the 16th in as a placeholder and lock one in for the 24th, since that is getting down toward the wire, and it's when the capital budget and CPC would have come out. And then the 6th would appear to make sense for school, but well, I don't, Chris, when you put on March 29/April 5 joint session school budget, is that an either or both in your view?
I just don't know what the school's calendar looks like, so that's why I left it kind of vague. They usually push right to the end.
Yeah, which is, well, that's a broader structural discussion we're going to have, because having 60% of our budget come in a week and a half before the meeting, why do we even bother? That's my personal view.
They start public conversations about it as early as tonight, I think. There's, if you want to engage them independently, you most certainly can, and say, look, we really want to meet about this earlier. You have a role to play in that by your charter. So that's up to you folks.
Okay, we'll do that. Well, listen, why don't we, Mary, just let me say this and then why don't we put those dates in our minutes and calendars for now? And then when we get back together on the 2nd of March, we can, refine it a little bit. That's sort of my notion. Mary, you had your hand up?
Yes, so the school department did start budget conversations. They meet on Wednesday evenings, so they had not quite gotten to it when our meeting had kicked off, unfortunately. But if it's kosher, Jean and I can certainly reach out and just try to coordinate with them. I'm not sure who might be kind of running the budget planning group. Do you know, Jean?
I did last year. I'm not sure what they're doing now.
I mean,
Well,
it
why don't
might
we-
be, I don't know, but
Why don't
But
we
I-
leave it to the two of you? I think it is, I mean, my opinions on these things aren't, on the kosher rules aren't all that, but for in this circumstance, I think you two connecting with who are the school committee liaisons should connect with them and come up with a plan that you're comfortable with in terms of, getting engaged and then maybe putting it on, when we do liaison reports, that we can work into our agenda and get updates as to where they're headed, and things that we may want to consider as a committee, and possibly an earlier joint meeting than the end of March, beginning of April.
yeah, and it might even be possible, they start their meetings at 6 o'clock and tend to adjourn by 8. So perhaps it's even possible if they came to visit us at 8 o'clock one night,
Okay.
and that it wouldn't have to add another meeting night, but
Good.
we'll check it out.
Okay, so why don't I do this? Does anybody want to, we've mapped out some potential meeting dates from February 2nd up to and including March 24th, just as, placeholders for meetings. Does, I don't know, Patrick, were you able to get all of those as I was kind of prattling about the?
I'm sorry, I actually got kicked off the meeting. I think my internet failed and it took me a
Oh.
while to get back in. And when I first got back in, I was watching, but I wasn't a panelist, so.
Oh, okay, well, why don't we do this? I'm gonna list a set of meeting dates that we had discussed. If somebody wants to move it, second it, we can talk about adjusting it, and then we can just adopt it, or whatever the outcome is our schedule. That makes sense? So, all
Sure.
right, so Patrick, the meeting dates that we discussed were February 2nd and 16th, March 2nd, 8, 16, and 24, with the 16th kind of expressly being a placeholder meeting. Which will, if we're a little behind, we can catch up, and if we're not, we can forego it. Does somebody want to move that?
Just a quick question, Rob, March 24th
Sure.
is Thursday. Did you want to say that, or did you want to say the 20th?
No, I did not want to say that. I read my calendar wrong. The 23rd. Thank you.
Okay. And then you also referenced March 8th, but that's the joint session.
That's the joint session. That should be the 9th.
Okay.
Anybody want to move to reconsider the vote for chair?
Can you read them again, please?
February 2, February 16, March 2, March 9, March 23.
Okay.
You dropped that for 1 second. Was March 16th still on that list? And that list, or was that not in there?
Yep.
March 16th is still on that list. That's the one with kind of an asterisk.
So moved.
Moved, seconded.
Second by Patrick.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, we should vote. All in favor, well, all in favor, Adam Amen,
Aye.
Gina Stino,
Aye.
Mike Barclay,
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy,
Aye.
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
Meg Wheeler,
Aye.
and I'm an aye. Okay. I was going to forego approval of minutes. I got some minutes late this afternoon. I didn't get a chance to circulate them to everybody. They'll keep. So before the next meeting, I'll send a set of minutes a couple or 3 days ahead of time to make sure everybody has them, and a chance to read them, and we can vote them then. I think one of them included some executive session minutes, which have to be approved in an executive session. So we'll have to work that out at some point. They should be, I think, Mike, they may be the ones that you have. And they
Yeah,
should
do I
be-
have to, so should I do a separate document for the
Yes.
executive session? Okay, all right.
Yes.
You know,
Um,
this is why I can't be, taking notes.
Nah. And then, topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours in advance of this meeting. I didn't see any. So that will bring us to adjournment. Let me just a couple of things. Strike that. Moving back to select board budget presentation. Chris, I emailed you a document a few minutes ago, or if I can share screen it, which apparently I can.
You should be able to, but I have the document. There you go.
Is that there? Okay, this is, and I think this is important to do now. This is our current set of committee liaison assignments. Does everybody see that okay?
Mhm.
And it lacks Adam for an assignment. And there may be, if anybody is interested in picking something up, dropping something, moving, it's like trading day. I was going to suggest, Adam, if you're interested for this budget cycle, joining up on water and sewer with Meg, that would, I mean, that's an obvious blank we have on the list if you're interested.
Yeah, and the other one, the committee I was on previously was the Alternative Energy Committee, and I'm in renewables, so that's probably the one that I have the most amount of experience.
Well, then by all means, we'll leave Fran on and add you.
Yeah.
I don't know whether the Alternative Energy Committee has anything coming up this time around, but I know I recall that there was a whole process about electric power contracting through the town. Chris, has that gone anywhere? It was on town meeting agenda like a year and a half ago.
They went for procurement of solar on public and private lands and buildings.
There was also the aggregation. Is that-
Yeah, it was the power
And the aggregation as well,
Yes.
yeah.
So the DPU, after not really doing much with it for almost 18 months, released a whole bunch of them at the same time. So we just got green lighted on the plan.
Oh, okay.
So that's actually started again. So there'll be more coming from that. But there's no more activity for town meeting. That said, the select board will be getting information on that from Good Energy as the bidding process rolls out. I'm not sure if this is the most auspicious time to be bidding for energy contracts, but I guess we'll find out what happens.
Okay, well, I'll send around that list. Were there any other adjustments anybody wanted to make to
Hey, Rob.
liaison assignments? Yes,
So just maybe a note, as I'm heading into the tax season, I probably should drop off of a few of them.
sure.
My goal is going to be to attend our meetings. Beyond that, I'm not sure I'll have much bandwidth. So I think I've got a partner on most of them except for CPC and I think planning. So if anybody wants to take those on,
Yeah,
that would be helpful.
I think water and sewer was one of the ones you didn't have a.
Correct. Also water and sewer, but if Adam does that one, then we're
Oh,
good.
so, okay, Adam's gonna do water and sewer.
Yeah,
I mean, I'll help with CPC.
perfect. Thanks. And I'm still gonna try, but I know my schedule.
I'm sorry, was that Mike who said?
Yeah,
Yeah,
And then I'll help with planning.
Thanks, Adam.
And there wasn't anybody on library elder affairs, and I said I would do that, I think, at the last meeting or.
thank you.
One of the
Okay, I'll
fall
put that
meetings.
down. All right, I'll revise that and circulate it, and I'll start to put liaison reports on the agenda as a regular and standing item.
You can make your first report, Patrick, the story trail. You can walk the story trail in the comment and get back to everybody about how that works.
So
My
I,
dog for a walk on the common.
okay, I think that was everything that was material. Cleaving to my campaign promises for timely meetings, we're 4 minutes under, so I'm gonna take all the credit for that. But once we get into the more substantive things, obviously, I think every, issue should be fleshed out fully, but efficiently. And I think this committee is good at that. So also, for those of you who are interested in following the school building committee, and it's, we had scheduled a report from that committee. It didn't quite happen. Maybe we'll try and get it back on the agenda at a time that works with all the rest of our business. But the school building committee meetings are available online. And there are two parts of those meetings I would commend to anyone that's interested. One of which is the presentation by the superintendent of sort of the overall condition of the schools and the drivers behind having a facilities committee, but also for government, fan people, like the kinds of folks who end up on advisory committees. The OPM for town hall, John Lemieux gave a presentation to that committee on the MSBA process, the Commonwealth funding for schools and how that gets accessed and what the timelines are. And since, the numbers that are associated with various iterations of that potential project are pretty eye-popping, they're going to be, something on which this committee is going to want to have eyes, along with capital budget, along with the school committee, along with a lot of folks. But his presentation, I think, is maybe 35 minutes, but it's really interesting from a prospect of how that process works and what is included and excluded from potential reimbursement, and what what moves the MSBA in directions of whether to accept a project at all, how much of a project, what they're looking at. If you want to get grounded in that process, I actually put it on my phone and listened to it while I was commuting. I didn't fall asleep and crash into anything, much the opposite. And John's a very articulate guy. He makes it, it's worth watching. So if you're interested in that issue, 2 thumbs up from this critic. And that's really all I had. I think that's within the ragged edges of what I can say under our notice agenda. So with that, unless anybody has anything else, very good. We need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mary,
Second.
Mike, we can't let that one die for one of a second. Okay, all in favor of adjournment? Adam Amen,
Aye.
Inestino,
Aye.
Mike Barclay,
Aye.
Patrick Kennedy,
Aye.
Mark Maggi,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Aye.
Meg Wheeler,
Aye.
and Rob Hillman is an aye. We stand adjourned. I'll see you all again on the 2nd of February.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Everyone, good night.
Everyone,
Aye.
take care.